Hello and welcome to the debut of Our Town Story, Golden Valley. I'm Dave Kaiser from CCX Media. Thanks for joining us. We are live tonight in the studios of CCX Media in Brooklyn Park to celebrate the city of Golden Valley. And to do that, we have some special guests in studio with us, and we have a video coming for you. Joining me in studio, two members of the Golden Valley Historical Society, Don Anderson and David Kubel. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you.
They are going to share some stories about the process of making the video, which was about a year-and-a-half process to get the video put together through CCX Media, and also reminisce a little bit about the history of Golden Valley. And they do have a museum in the city of Golden Valley that is a wonderful treasure, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that treasure to the city. You'll see I have my computer next to me here, and that is because we want you to get involved, and so Facebook is the way you can reminisce with us tonight. So comment about some of the things you see. If there's questions you'd like these two experts to answer about the city of Golden Valley, or maybe things for them to consider as they continue meeting with the Golden Valley Historical Society. So let's begin with a little talk about history, Don and David. Before we get to the video, and for those watching, 15 minutes till the video, coming up at about 6:16, so it is coming here. We want to talk a little bit about the importance of history, Don. So shed a little light on why history is so important, and especially, and maybe even particularly for a suburban city.
Well, thank you, Dave, for doing the documentary. We appreciate that, you and your crew. The purpose of the Historical Society is to have someone or a group investigate the heritage of that community and find the heritage, preserve the heritage, and then educate the people in the community about that heritage. So that's basically the purpose of the all museums have that same general purpose. In Golden Valley, we started in 1973 with a group of 90 people who got together and said, yes, we really need to have a historical society. And they were meeting in the library, and they meeting at various churches, various places, and then they did not have a home. But they began investigating the heritage. They first went and found the 100-year-old houses in Golden Valley that were 100 years back in 1973. And then they investigated the history of those individual houses, and then they wrote pamphlets on each of them.
Wonderful. And
the history of the people, of the ownership in that period of time. And from then on, we had a group of people who were involved in putting together a history book of Golden Valley. It's called Celebrate Golden Valley, 1886 to 1986, and the Historical Society published that and sold it to the community, and right now we're all sold out, except you can buy one on eBay for something like $50 a piece. We were selling them at 12.
That's how important history is, right? You can make some extra dollars with those books. Don, I'm going to stop you right there because I want to ask you more about those next steps. And I know there's a lot more the Historical Society has done because, as you'll see in some of the photos that are displaying behind Don and David, there's some great history, and there's this little white church along Golden Valley Road that you might want to take a few moments to stop by if they haven't already. So Don will come back to you a little bit more about the next steps of the Historical Society. David, same question to you. Why is history so important, and especially for a suburban city like Golden Valley?
You know, I was told that when the bicentennial of the United States came around, that's when a lot of history societies started. They came to realize that there's history in our town just like there is in the country. Of course, knowing where you came from helps you know where you're going, and so it really triggered that, the bicentennial, having people want to look into the history of their own towns. And so like Don talked about collecting and preserving that history. And I look at it and I say, you know, for a person in Golden Valley or any town to understand, you know, where the community came from, the history of it, it's just so much more richness in building up the community within Golden Valley and any other city. So to collect that information, to have that history is, I think, very vital.
And is it true a lot of times, David, I'll start with you, that in a lot of cases, not only in suburban cities but everywhere, that the history sometimes gets held in, that people have these great pictures or great items in their home and they never are shared? And so your goal is to try to share them. Is that correct?
I agree, yes. I think that is very true. And on the opposite side, people who move into the city don't realize that there's the history and don't realize where those resources and things are. And so we want to make the Golden Valley Historical Society more prominent out there as a resource for those people.
And we're going to talk a little bit about how people can get involved. So Don, let's continue the story. So as the group was trying to get information together, try to find ways to share things, the book was written. Then the process began to ramp up a little bit and a location was thought about. Take us from '86 to the present now.
Well, I guess the biggest thing was that the Christian Science Society owned the Little White Church in the valley on Golden Valley Road, and they were going to disband. And one of our members heard from the chairman of the Christian Science Society that they were going to do this. They were going to put the building on and the property on the market for sale. And he talked to me and said, let's go and see if we can look at it, see if it's a possibility of having it for our home. So we did, and we asked the chair of the Christian Science Society not to put it on the market. And we had a group meeting of our members, and we had a debate back and forth, trying to decide should we get into real estate ownership or not.
Right.
And they voted. The vote was 17-14 in favor of buying attempting to buy the church. And from that point on, the second thing on the agenda is where are we going to come up with $84,000 to pay the Christian Science Society?
That's always a good question.
And so we talked about pies and hot dishes and donuts and sales, something that would have taken a century to come up with $84,000.
Right.
But a little lady sitting in the back of the room raised her hand and said, would it be all right if one person donates the $84,000? And our members looked at each other and they said, well, I think that would work out. And so we ended up on July 1 of 1997 buying the church through the courtesy of the little lady. And from that point on, we were intending to take all the pews out and make it into a museum.
Right.
Well, before we got around to doing that, people kept coming to us and to me and saying, you got such a cute place there, can we get married there? Well, that was 204 weddings later. We decided we better have a museum, so we built an addition on the back, and that's where we have an award-winning museum that certainly, unfortunately, has to be closed because of the virus now, but soon we hope it'll be able to be open again. And people come in who came in before the virus. People would come in and they would see something on the display and they would begin having a memory of that. And as a greeter, it's great to be able to listen to these people and their opportunity to share their experiences in a historical way too.
Fantastic, and we're going to tell you more about that museum. We're going to show you some shots of that in the video, as when we interviewed Don, he was there. And David, were you also at the museum as well when we did the interview? It's been a while. I can't remember the exact location.
Yes, well, we did it in the museum.
Yep, okay, so the museum will be proudly shown in this video. And before we get to the video, and check the watch here, we're about 7 minutes away from the video tonight. Let's talk about how unique it is for a city the size of Golden Valley to have a museum. That does not happen everywhere, and I know there's other cities around, even in this 9-city area, that want to get something going, but it's difficult to get something going. So how unique is that, and how proud should Golden Valley be, Don, of having a museum to preserve that history?
Well, I would say it's probably a good thing that we had a couple people in our organization that were alert to the fact that this might become a home. And we weren't sure that it would ever come to be, but we continued down that road. And through the little lady with her volunteer $84,000, we were able to have a home. And that brought people together to become members. We were visible in the community. And, and obviously, we, in talking to people, invited them to come to our programs, a monthly program that we would have with fine programs along the way. And we also had an opportunity for people to have become members of the board and participated in some of the committees that we have. So
excellent.
It put us on the map.
Excellent, and we'll talk more about that as we go throughout the program. All right, a little preview talk about the video itself here and some of the process that went into that. It started back in early 2019 is when some of the initial meetings happened, and this is part of a project that CCX Media and our staff have been involved with all of the 9 northwest suburbs that we serve. So Golden Valley and Plymouth on the south, up to Brooklyn Park, Maple Grove, Osseo on the north. So we have 5 history videos that have been completed up to this point, and they are on Our Town Story on the CCX Media website, so you can look for some of the other cities. And it's been interesting through this process, both of you, that people will be in Golden Valley and they'll say, well, I want to learn about the history of Robbinsdale as well. I go there all the time. I hear things about Robbinsdale, so a lot of sharing back and forth. Early in 2019, we did interviews and captured a lot of great stories and interesting facts about the city of Golden Valley. Here's some names that you might recognize along with these 2 that are sitting with us as part of the video. Linda Loomis, a former mayor of the city, Joni Clausen, our current council member, and a lot of ties back to parks, as you'll hear within the video. Marshall Tannick, who a lot of people know in the city, loves the city of Golden Valley and a lot of history with the city. Mary Anderson, someone related to the former mayor here as well. Also, we had a chat with Mayor Harris, the current mayor of the city of Golden Valley. So those are some of the people that we see within the video. Again, after capturing those stories, we went out and shot lots of footage in the city of Golden Valley and then dug deep into the archives to find out some of the pictures. And a big thank you to another person who you'll see in the video is Crystal Boyd, who is a volunteer with the Historical Society. We had her be the last interview. She kind of was a cleanup batter to pick up some pieces that we maybe said we're missing a little of that or a little of this, and she did some studying and did a great job, but also helped us with some video and pictures. Final editing completed during the spring of 2020, and then COVID hit. So we thought, how are we going to show this video to people? And we've been holding it saying, we've got to get this out. So that is what led us to tonight and an opportunity to share that video. David, what did you think when we came to you and said, we'd like to put you on video, we'd like to talk to you about history? Was it something you jumped at the chance to do?
Did.
What were your thoughts?
I love history, but I want to go back. You talked about people having things in their homes.
Yes.
And people have to remember that history isn't 100 years or 200 years back. History is no more than 10, 20, and 30 years ago. And
Good
so
point.
as we talk about collecting history, it's really not that long ago.
Right, the speed that things change these days, right? Something
Exactly.
can become obsolete in 10 years. How about for you, Don, as far as being interviewed and being part of this video? What did that mean to you, and what were your thoughts as I came to the Historical Society long ago and sat down with you?
Well, obviously I thought it would be a great opportunity for the Golden Valley Historical Society to be put out in front of the public, and hopefully it will bring membership into our organization. It will make people aware of the fact that we're on Golden Valley Road. We have a museum, an award-winning museum, by the way, and so I was pleased, terribly pleased.
3 minutes away from the roll of the video, just a final question as we get ready here. Favorite part of the story as we preview it going ahead here? David, I have to imagine with you, and as we've chatted over this period of time, transportation was really a fun part for you to talk about. Is that correct?
I had done some research on Highway 100, which is a key part of Golden Valley.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it was nice to see that in the video. And I'd love to tell people the story of Highway 100 if they were interested.
All right, well, you're going to catch a little bit of it here. And one of the things to remember about the video that comes up is you try to put as much as you can into 33 minutes, but you can't cover the entire history in 33 minutes, right, Don? So the hope is we whet your appetites. We cover some of what the interviewees thought were some of the key points to pass along and get you thinking to maybe visit the society and learn a little bit more. So really, this is a taste of Golden Valley. Would that be correct, Don, a way to say it?
Correct, yes. Yes.
You would need years and years to cover all of the history of the city of Golden Valley, so we cannot do that in 33 minutes. But here is a look, as we're a minute away, of the history video from the city of Golden Valley. The areas that we covered within the video, let me just move ahead to that note here. We talked a little bit about the area settling. What was it like when the settling occurred? The Native Americans in this area, how did things shift over that? And then how did the first activity occur? How did the village begin to be formed? Who were the farmers? What was some of the industry happening in the city at that time? Certainly we talked about schools, and for those of you that might remember that Golden Valley High School, yes, we have some comments about that and some video of that as well. And then we worked a little bit more towards how the city became formed and the city government and some of the things behind government in the city of Golden Valley. And then we jumped to the future and talked about the development that has occurred. General Mills, Honeywell, Golden Valley Shopping Center, some of these places you probably go on a regular basis, and also some of the clubs. And that was one of the unique things that I took away from this video, is the involvement in the city of Golden Valley over the years has been amazing in different clubs and organizations, and you're going to hear a little bit about that. All right, Don, David, you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Let's go.
All right, this is the first ever showing of Our Town Story Golden Valley right here on CCX Media, and thanks to Golden Valley Historical Society and the city for partnering. You're seeing it through their outlets as well. Let's roll the video, sit back and enjoy Our Town Story Golden Valley.
Well, Native Americans lived in Golden Valley long before Europeans showed up. We have some nice lush valleys where they would have been protected from the elements, and there was a lot of firewood, so they could have stayed warm here.
The community has grown from a farming community to residential, industrial, commercial.
It's kind of like a badge of honor that these major corporations would choose to locate and headquarter in Golden Valley.
The infrastructure has been a major feature in Golden Valley's growth and stability and development.
This is a good location to live, it's a good location to work, it's a good location to, to recreate.
There was lots of woods, lots of bogs, lots of lakes, wetlands.
Golden Valley is pretty much a swamp, and so the roads worked around, and a lot of them followed the Indian trails. The Indians worked their way around the swamps and lakes.
Well, Native Americans lived in Golden Valley long before Europeans showed up. This area was probably used mostly in the winter because we have some nice lush valleys where they would have been protected from the elements, and there was a lot of firewood, so they could have stayed warm here. Some of the glaciers that came through created the topography that we have in Golden Valley. The hills, the swales, the lakes that are here, a lot of that is the result of glaciers that came through. There were a lot of trails along Bassett Creek, so we know that they were familiar with the area and moved through here.
Now the Indians trapped and had furs that they put in their canoes, and they went down Bassett Creek to the Mississippi River, then to Fort Snelling, to the training post there.
In 1851, the coercive Treaty of Mendota was signed, and that gave Native Americans in the area 2 years to move west to a reservation on the Minnesota River.
After the 1851 treaty, people came up the Mississippi and they came here to farm the land.
The territory was opened up by the federal government. They had gone through and surveyed the territory, and they opened it up to people who wanted to encourage expansion of the population.
The early settlers in Golden Valley, many of them came from the East Coast, and they were Yankees. We also had some new immigrants from Ireland trying to escape the famines over there, and a lot of German-speaking farmers. So folks were moving into the area. Billy Jones and John Garrity were some of our earliest settlers. They arrived from Chicopee Falls, Massachusetts. Also, William Varner and his family came from Ohio.
John Garrity and Jones were friends, and they migrated to Golden Valley. They were amongst the first farmers.
Some of the early settlers also started market gardens, so they would farm here and bring that produce into Minneapolis for sale. Selling in Minneapolis was really attractive because it worked better than the bartering system that they had as early settlers. They could get hard cash to buy the things that they needed. So the market gardens are interesting because it shows them moving from a bartering system to a more economic system.
Eventually we had 7 greenhouses in Golden Valley.
In its very early years, there was a large landscape greenhouse located where Courage Center is. And it was an area that was somewhat well known in the whole region as having a tremendous large greenhouse. And people would come there and buy and sell flowers and floral arrangements. That existed from the 1880s to about the 1920s.
It's an interesting story about how Golden Valley might have gotten its name.
William Varner, it said that he walked over the top of a hill and looked down into the valley and saw a beautiful golden flowers.
He got to a high point on what is now the Golden Valley Country Club, and he looked down in a valley, a lush valley dotted with yellow flowers, and decided this was a golden valley, and he wanted to live here and name it Golden Valley. In 1886, there was a vote for Golden Valley to incorporate as a village. There were 78 votes for becoming a village and 1 vote against. We don't know much about that vote, but I'm very interested in it. Some of the people involved with incorporating as a village were the Scheids, the Sweeneys, and the Varners. So many of our early residents were involved with incorporating as a village.
They at that time had the citizens vote to decide whether they would become a form of government under a charter or under 2 options that were available under state law. And one was statutory A and one was statutory B. The citizens of the city voted and decided they would be a statutory B city. That meant that they would have a hired city, and they called him at that time then city manager. The council then became the policy-making body, and the mayor and council were working together then to decide what the policies were and give direction to the city manager.
The railroad line that runs along essentially the northern boundary of Golden Valley near Winnetka Avenue, where the city hall is, at one time was a very prominent, bustling railroad area with grain shipments that coming in from the west and going out to the west and other commodities. One of the famous Minnesota zoning cases concerned a structure that was built on the area where that railroad line now is. It's roughly where the McDonald's is in Golden Valley on Winnetka. The railroad owned that area back in the day, and the railroad wanted to construct homes, sheds some call them, on that area there in order to house its workers. The area back in those days was not zoned for residential. So the railroad built these homes on the land that now is occupied by the library and the McDonald's in Golden Valley. It led to a big conflagration with the city, which did not want those houses there because it wasn't zoned properly. The case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld the city's position that the railroad could not build these houses on that property because the property lacked the proper zoning. The railroad argued that this wasn't a residential development. These were buildings that were used to house its workers, so it was really commercial rather than residential. But the importance of that case is it established some very significant doctrines in Minnesota's zoning law as to what constitutes residential versus commercial property. That case gets cited often by lawyers litigating zoning cases, and it all happened right here in Golden Valley.
Chris Ewald and his brother and his mother, they came to Minneapolis, and they started a dairy farm in the Hiawatha area. Then the Minneapolis Park Board decided that they wanted to take over that area for a park. And so Chris Ewald ended up moving their cattle, driving them through the city of Minneapolis into Golden Valley.
The Ewalds had a farm over off of Winnetka and Herald area. They had a barn up there off of Ewald Terrace, and they had their golden Guernseys, because that was their tag that their milk came from golden Guernseys.
And many people have fond memories of those milkmen coming to their house to deliver everything from orange juice to milk to butter to sour cream. They were a real part of people's lives for a long time.
There was a need for educating the children, and so the farmers got together and they built a one-room schoolhouse.
Billy Jones and some of the other early residents built the first school in Golden Valley in 1858. It was the Oak Grove School. It was just a one-room log cabin structure.
All the students were in the same room, taught by the same teacher from first grade all the way up to maybe 8th grade.
Meadowbrook School was one of our early schools. That's still around as an elementary school. Several others came in and different school districts were established.
Some of the residents of Golden Valley were interested in having their own school district.
Those neighbors wanted that school district. They worked hard for that.
They built a high school and operated for several years.
It had an excellent academic program that rivaled any suburban school in the Twin Cities.
In 1980, the school, Golden Valley School District had to merge. We just, because of state law and how they funded schools, we just could no longer make it. If Golden Valley could have held off just for a few more years till open enrollment, that school would have never closed.
One of the interesting factors about the two school districts is the school boundaries, the district boundaries, wander between houses and are very confusing. Your neighbor might be going to Robbinsdale High School or Armstrong High School, and the next door neighbor will be going to the Hopkins High School, and that's confusing to the people, to say the least.
When I look at like St. Louis Park and Edina and I see, those school districts are pretty contiguous with the city boundaries, it makes a big difference in the small town feel of a community, and I think that it's hurt Golden Valley.
By the late 1970s, Breck was looking for a new facility. By that time, it had outgrown its rather small, rural, largely Episcopalian roots and was a larger private school. It needed more space and it needed a large facility. Golden Valley was out of business now as a public school. It had a vacant site there, and there were two interested parties. Breck School, looking for a facility for its school, and the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings were very interested in that site for a number of reasons. The size was good. The building was probably larger than it needed, but it gave enough size where they could convert that to dormitories on campus for players. It had a nice football field, and the location was very convenient right at the intersection of Highway 100 and Golden Valley Road. Ultimately, they got outbid by Breck, and Breck decided it was more important for them to have that facility than the Vikings, and they offered more money for it, and they bought it from the Golden Valley public school system.
I think Golden Valley is rich with history when it comes to our schools, whether it be the private schools or the public schools. And in some cases, the two overlap in the respect. I mean, you think about the Golden Valley High School, of what it once was, and now today it's a private school. It's Breck School. It's one of the premier private schools in the metropolitan area, and for that matter, in the entire state.
The community has grown from a farming community to residential, industrial, commercial.
In the turn of the century, we had 500 residents here. By 1965, we had 23,000.
The 50s were the big growth time for Golden Valley. People coming back from the war, first-ring suburb, houses were being built.
After World War II, then when the GIs came back from the war, there was a demand for more housing, and that's when they started making developments in various parts of Golden Valley, starting with the eastern part and going back to the west.
We were right next to Minneapolis, so the next phase moving west was Golden Valley. Paul Inghauser was a developer with Hub Nelson. They didn't want it to look like Minneapolis with the just square. They wanted to have the curvy roads and have a different, more open feel. I think a lot of people have moved to Golden Valley because of that open space and what we have to offer. And Paul Inghauser really brought that concept to our city.
The infrastructure has been a major feature in Golden Valley's growth and stability and development.
The highway system has created some opportunities for us. I mean, for sure, back in the 50s and the 60s, as the infrastructure here in Golden Valley was developed, I mean, these highway systems, Highway 55, Highway 12, which is now Highway 394, Highway 169, the Beltway, which is now Highway 100, it brought people to Golden Valley, not only for work, but to also, to settle down here.
Highway 100 was part of what they called the Beltway. And the Beltway was to go all the way around the cities. In the 20s, when they came up with this idea, and this was an innovative, truly innovative idea, they were thinking ahead, because where Highway 100 was going to end up was nowhere. Why are they building a road out in the middle of nowhere? But they, not only were they thinking about this Highway 100, this north-south, and the concept being that I could drive out Highway 12 and go down to, or north up to Highway 55 and then go back into the city into a different part, rather than try to manage the traffic within the city itself. So that was the concept. But even as they were talking about that, it already said, well, when this Beltway is full, or being used, we can build the next one. So they were already thinking of 169 and 494 beyond that. And so that kind of blew me away that in the 20s, they were already thinking of that much expansion.
We set at least a foundation for improving highways and transportation in a way that we're benefiting from today. And it was foresight on the part of the planning people in Golden Valley and the state that helped accomplish that.
Early on, there were no parks because we did not start our park board until 1948. But it was in the 50s that those parks started to come into play. In 1952, my dad joined the park board, and that is really when it took off.
Well, there was one individual who was a member of the city council. His name was Ray Stockman. And Ray Stockman was a firm believer that there should be more parks for the kids to play in. And so he went around and talked to the owners of property that had, whether the developers, and saying, how about donating some of your land so that we can make it a park for your community? He was actually the father of the park system in Golden Valley.
As people were moving into the west of Golden Valley, they would actually call and ask if there was a park proposed for that area, because they did not want to buy a house that there weren't going to be any parks.
New parks have been developed, new softball fields have been added. We're always looking in Golden Valley for ways to improve our parks and recreation. We're never satisfied with what we have here, and I think that's an important reason why the park and recreation facilities are so good.
It's important that we reinvest in our parks. It's important that we reinvest in our infrastructure. The way that we stay ahead of the curve is through innovation. And one way to do that is by continuing to reinvest and to fortify our infrastructure that we have and our park and maintenance, our park and recreation system. I talk about Shopper Park and being the only city that has a Ninja Warrior course in the entire state.
We have 9 community parks, 11 neighborhood parks, and we have special area parks like Isaacson, Sahaki.
I mean, the city feels it's important to invest in these types of innovative park and recreation activities and infrastructure because it builds that community, it adds to that quality of life.
Theater Worth was always, we used to go down there on our bikes in the summertime and swim at the beach, and then they had the Aqua Follies there. They had like this little stadium, and it was really weird because it just sat right on the lake. And now you do stuff like that, they're in like a pool, they're not in an actual lake.
The Aqua Follies were on the lake. They had precision swimmers and entertainment. It was well attended.
Brookview has a very interesting history. It started as a private golf course known as Superior Golf Course around the time of World War I. By the end of World War II, because of changes in demographic patterns, economic issues, and the like, the original owners of Brookview, they decided to sell it.
In 1957, they wanted to buy a club. People worked really hard to get that referendum through, but it did pass, and we bought Brookview for $1.25 million, and a year and a half ago, we redid it for $18.5 million. And it is beautiful today. We're so proud of it. But our golf course is having their 50th anniversary of becoming a municipal golf course this year.
The old Brookview building was adequate, but it was falling apart.
To keep redoing it's like an old car. You can just keep fixing the rust, but it's going to die anyway.
There wasn't enough interest to build a very beautiful facility now, and it has an indoor playground for little kids and many meeting rooms.
Building our new Brookview is beautiful. It's just opened up events for us and meeting rooms. So to me, that's probably one of the biggest things since I've been on the council.
Women were a major force in bringing about the Human Rights Commission. One of the leaders in that organization was Sylvia Kaplan, who at that time, in the mid and late 60s, was the editor of the weekly newspaper in Golden Valley. And she was one of the mainstays of creating the Human Rights Commission and also encouraging more women to become active in civic affairs and politics.
The first woman elected to the City Council in Golden Valley was Pat Moberg, and she was a league member. She had also been active on the Human Rights Commission, and she was elected and started serving in 1972.
Golden Valley became a haven for women in significant leadership positions. Rosemary Thorson in 1978 became the first woman mayor of Golden Valley, well before other communities had women mayors.
She was committed to the community. She was very involved in a number of issues and recognized the need to involve people in the community. It meant to the league and to the women involved a great advancement and victory that women could be recognized as being able to participate and work together with men as elected officials.
There have been other women mayors since then. Golden Valley's had 3 women mayors, Mary Anderson, Linda Loomis. They all served long terms.
The league was the one that I was first involved in and got me involved in community activity.
Mary Anderson was the mayor of Golden Valley for many years, was a chair of the Metropolitan Commission, so she has brought to Golden Valley a real broad outlook to how suburbs should be run, how they should interact with other communities. The concept of a Human Rights Commission in Golden Valley was stirred in the mid-60s, and that was part of the growing civil rights movement, which is reaching a climatic point in the late and mid-60s.
We had a reputation for not being so welcoming.
An incident at a facility known as The Point, which was a supper club, nightclub in Golden Valley, and it intended to attract a minority crowd.
They hired a black musician who lived in Minneapolis and drove to The Point here in Golden Valley. And there was a time where his name was Oliver Lyle, and he, every time he drove to Golden Valley, either coming or going, he was pulled over by a Golden Valley police officer. And he filed a lawsuit against the city of Golden Valley and the police officer and the police chief. That got some people a little bit irritated for the fact that the police department were preventing people from coming and going who were of a different color. There was a group of citizens that met in a private home that was called Action Now.
Action Now was a human rights organization that was active in the 60s, 70s.
And they decided, what can we do to change the attitude of the community? And they had a program and projects, and they were successful in getting people to realize that that is not something that is acceptable in Golden Valley.
There's a lot of people here in Golden Valley that have done a lot to try to change that too.
John Mitchell was on the council when I think Pat Moberg first joined. He is the first black person that was elected to the council in Golden Valley, and I think he served just for one term. But he was the one that started the February Black Heritage project. Also was instrumental in getting the first Human Rights Commission in the state of Minnesota in a community. So he was an advocate of integration and did a fine job.
Some of our major corporate partners, especially the ones that have been here for a long time, they discovered Golden Valley and saw that it was a good location, being so proximate to downtown Minneapolis.
We're fortunate to have those big companies.
General Mills built their headquarters over on 169 and Wayzata Boulevard. And then Honeywell had built a plant on Douglas Drive. The tenant company bought a piece of land on Douglas Drive and Highway 55, and they built a factory. They are one of the world's largest manufacturers of floor cleaning equipment, internationally known.
What happened is these large companies became centered in Golden Valley with Allianz and General Mills and the like. In Golden Valley, it is said, and I think it's true, now the more people work in Golden Valley than live in Golden Valley.
We employ about 33,000 people a day in Golden Valley, and we have about 20,000 residents. So we really are a hub for the workplace.
The large companies, the Fortune 500 companies, provide an economic base for the smaller companies, the smaller businesses.
Golden Valley then became a city that had a greater proportion of land zoned commercial industrial, which added to the tax base, which helped our city as far as raising its money to run the city.
Businesses, they contribute to the community, so they are active in supporting the local community.
Some of these corporate partners actually contributed financially to the building of our City Hall in the 1950s. And they still contribute to our community through our Golden Valley Community Foundation or through making contributions to our Crime Prevention Fund.
Don Byerly is another example of someone who's been a signature person in Golden Valley.
Don Byerly lived in California, and he saw the stores there. A particular store had carpeting on the floor, wide aisles, and were open long hours. And he decided that would work in Minneapolis, and so he found a site in Golden Valley on Highway 100 and Duluth Street and built his first grocery store there.
It was a great asset to the city to have Don Byerly decide to locate here.
Byerly's brought a new type of shopping to the Twin Cities community. Lund's had done some of that, but Byerly's doing it in the suburbs, created a whole new kind of shopping experience for people that they weren't familiar with before. And today when we see the Trader Joe's and the Whole Food stores and other stores, they are in many respects derived from and the beneficiaries of the Byerly's pattern of selling groceries.
It's kind of like a badge of honor that these major corporations would choose to locate and headquarter in Golden Valley. I think it says something about who we are and what we can provide as a service that they feel that this is the right place for their future.
Golden Valley Garden Club thought that Highway 100 should be beautified with something, and so they talked to the Highway Department. The Highway Department said, yeah, that's fine. And so they had a fundraiser to buy lilacs, and they did.
The Garden Club, this is their 80th year. They were instrumental in getting lilacs planted on Highway 100 and getting that named as Lilac Drive. And the Garden Club has been probably the organization with the longest continuous operation in the city. There's always been a garden club.
The Garden Club was really influential in developing Lilac Days.
The Lilac Festival was a big deal. It used to go for a whole week, and there would be a golf tournament. They would have a big banquet up at the Golden Valley Country Club. They had the Queen coronation, and it was just a lot of stuff. There was a parade, the Lilac Parade. So it just seemed like it was the thing to do.
There was also a very strong Lions Club, and this would have been in the 1958, early 60s, and they were really the people who did things for the community.
The Rotary has been very influential in their work in our community.
They planted trees in Brookview Park and also Bassett Creek Park. They have scholarships for high school kids going on to college.
The Optimist Club was a club that was focused on helping youth in the community. The club itself was a Golden Valley Optimist Club for many years, which is still active and still works to help youth in the community, provide scholarships.
We have the Pride Festival. It's really our biggest event. It's wonderful. It's not part of the city. It's its own entity, but we've had about 5,000 people come. We're very proud of it. And it's just accepting and working and being with, our community members.
We have a community of 22,000 residents now. That's during the nighttime, that's during the weekends. During the daytime, yeah, we're talking 35,000 corporate citizens, if you want to say. And going forward, looking to the future, it's very possible that that could be closer to 45,000.
Private property developers are a lot of what drives things right now in the financial world. And I think that's why you're seeing so many apartments being built right now, because that's where people are able to get financing for. So right now, multifamily apartments are the thing.
We've added about 1,200 new apartments, and it's giving another way of housing for our house that we didn't have.
When people can bring alternative perspectives, and we can learn about different cultures, we can learn about different faiths, we can learn about different languages, you learn about the history of where people came from, and it just adds more excitement and more interest and more richness, and just makes it all the better for our community.
The Golden Valley History Museum is so important for our community so that they can see the stories and interact with them in person. The Golden Valley Historical Society had wanted to build a museum for many, many years, and they were lucky enough and fortunate enough to have a donor who helped us build this building. We came together and put together the exhibits on the inside.
Everybody knows Don Anderson. I think he probably should be called Mr. Golden Valley. If he isn't, he's been the Historical Society. Not to discount other people who play a major role, but Don is the bearer of the history of Golden Valley.
He has been the instigator of this whole thing. Without him, we would not have it.
I think the Historical Society, is a key part, just like the schools, the churches, the city. It holds the community together.
We are so lucky to have the Historical Society in the museum. It's so important. You don't know where you're going unless you know and respect your past. And it's important for us to know our heritage, to know our history, and to, in a sense, to continue it forward. And we're so fortunate that the Historical Society and the museum have been able to provide that to us. It really is a gift.
If people were to join, become members, it would help them like it helped me become more of a Golden Valley citizen.
The Golden Valley Historical Society is always looking for more volunteers. We have a lot of fun projects that we want to pursue. We can do research, we can clean up the collections, you can work as a volunteer greeter in the museum. So there's really a place for every talent. Anyone who wants to be involved can help us share Golden Valley's history.
There you have it, your first look at our town story, Golden Valley. Hope you enjoyed it. And again, just scratching the surface of the great history of the city of Golden Valley. And we now want to spend some time talking a little bit more about some of the things in the video and get you involved as well. And again, my computer ready here. If you have comments, thoughts, want to send them in through Facebook, the couple ways we're streaming this out, you can certainly send in some comments. And the next portion of time, 30-40 minutes, is just to chat and talk a little bit about what was in the video. And let's chat again with our guests here in studio, Don Anderson, David Kubel, both members of the Golden Valley Historical Society. And we'll talk a little bit more about the society as we get further into the program here about ways to get involved. Don, first to you. How does it feel to be called the instigator? Is that all right with you, to be the instigator of this history stuff in Golden Valley?
Well, I'm very proud of the organization. I got involved in 1993 when the Historical Society was having problems with membership. People were leaving town, moving to their kids. Some were dying. And a couple of members of the board called my wife and said, can the city do anything to help us? And my wife told them, well, you're a private corporation and the city can't be involved that way, but I'd be willing to sit down with you and brainstorm ideas. So she hung up after she made an appointment with the two fellows, and she said, turned to me, and I had just retired from 25 years in the real estate business. And she said, would you please go with me to meet these two people? Right. And I, being there, having nothing to do, I said, sure, I'll go with you. And so I spent 2 hours with these two fellows, listening to them and talking about what the Historical Society had accomplished, the people involved, and that impressed me. And at the end of this conversation, my wife turned to me and said, what can you do to help the Golden Valley Historical Society? Well, that kind of took me by surprise, but I told them that I was impressed and I would be willing to become a member if they would give me the authority as a secretary and give me an additional authority as secretary, not just taking minutes and typing the minutes and so forth, but doing something more than. And so they said, well, we'll talk to our board, and they agreed, and so I attended my first meeting and actually took over the organization and pulled it out of the bankruptcy route that it was in.
And as they say, the rest is history, right? You have been very involved ever since that time, and behind publications, items that come out like this, to a list. How big is the list now of members that receive information from the Historical Society?
We have 162 members.
Fantastic.
And when I joined, there were about 35 members with $300 in the bank. And we now have a net worth of over $700,000.
All right, we'll talk a little bit about what it takes to become a member and what it means to be a member, because there's many different levels of being a member of the Historical Society. David, want to hop to you as far as watching the tape here for the first time, looking at the history video. What stands out to you? What jumps out as you watch that and triggered maybe some thoughts in your mind as you were watching?
Well, one of my favorite parts is when they have the parade for the Lilac Festival, going down the highway. You know, who can imagine closing down Highway 100 and having a parade? It would never happen today, but back then. Also, and I don't know if it was mentioned, but the original church that we have for the Historical Society is the oldest building in Golden Valley. And we are very fortunate to have both that building and the museum. And it also, I'm the treasurer of the Historical Society, so I can tell you it's also very expensive to maintain buildings, especially one as old as that church.
I can imagine. You mentioned earlier, before we saw the video, a comment about history doesn't have to be 100, 200 years ago.
Right.
History can be 10 years ago, and I was caught by the end part of the video, even for some maybe newer people to Golden Valley, seeing the apartments along 394 and 100 start to pop up. And I think that for some people that's kind of a change in history. Would that be right, that kind of opened maybe another chapter and it'll be something people remember? When did that happen? That was in the 2010s, right?
Yeah, and I love the pictures, right? The pictures that you have, because as long as the picture has a story behind it, and they usually do. So if you talk about those apartments being built, what did it look like before the apartments were built, and who has a picture of that? I think that's great stuff.
All right, I'm turning over to the computer here and some questions that are coming in. And again, viewers, we encourage you to go to Facebook, ccxmedia.org's Facebook page, and you can comment in. And a couple comments that have come in. All right, we're going to go to the cows here. And it was very interesting. A couple days ago, I got an email from the Ewalds saying, when is the video going to be shown? We want to see this. And it was someone that was involved in gathering some of the information. And again, you saw it in the credits, but a big thank you to Matt Kilby, the producer, did a lot of editing, shooting for this project, and he was the one that contacted the Ewalds, so it was great to get that word. But I emailed back quickly and said, is this the Ewalds of the Ewald Dairy, and some connection there? We have a question related to the Ewalds, would be, let me just hop to it here. Did the famous tagline, Ewald Golden Gurneys, derive from the Golden Valley location? Gentlemen, any memories, thoughts about the Golden Gurney name?
No, it's the fact that the Guernseys are brown, kind of a rich brown and golden. And I think it was also referring to the richness of the milk, the high butter fat.
Okay, very good. And tell us a little bit more. We touched on it in the video, obviously, but they were kind of a border company, if you will, to Golden Valley and Minneapolis. Is that right, Don?
Well, their plant was actually on Xerxes in Minneapolis, but across on the west side of Xerxes was the parking lot for the wagons and the trucks. And so we were, as you're right, borderline companies.
We have a note as well saying, it's wonderful, thanks for putting this together. Her father, Lyle Mottinger, would have been thrilled to see this. Thank you from the Mottinger family.
Oh,
Does
yes.
the Mottinger family ring a bell to both of you?
Lyle was on our board of directors for some years.
Oh,
Yes.
fantastic.
Yes, and a great asset to the community.
David, when we talked a little bit about transportation in the piece, it was connected somewhat to some of the big companies that came in, so General Mills, Honeywell. Again, how important was that? And again, that's not old history. This is more recent than people think. How important was that transportation to being part of landing those big corporations in this area?
I think anytime you're thinking about building a factory or an office building, you're thinking, how are our workers going to get here? And looking to see that you have the highways, like the mayor pointed out, Highway 100, Highway 169, Highway 12394. Those are all keys to making Golden Valley such an easy place to get to work.
Don, let's talk about Golden Valley High School for a minute. And again, as people drive down Highway 100 and they look at the spot now, which is Breck School now, I bet for a lot of people that brings back some pretty fond memories. What can you tell us about Golden Valley High School and what it was like back in the 70s, correct?
Well, I can tell you that there's a great number of alumni
Yes.
all around the country who have maintained an association mainly through the internet, and I have met many of them. They have wanted to talk to me about buying some of our vintage street signs. We have after World War II. They changed they planted the new street signs at that time, and they were, and many of the streets were already built. And then the government said, we got to change the street signs to be reflective. Okay. And so they had to change all the street signs as they did the street reconstruction. And I got a call from the superintendent asking if the Historical Society would like to have these street signs, and I said, sure. And I thought, well, maybe we'll get a dozen or so. 1,100 was the first delivery. It was a front-end loader bringing them. And we started selling them, and they started from the east side of Golden Valley, working their way west, bringing them in.
Sure.
And we still have about 1,000 left for people who are interested. But we shipped many of those street signs to the alumni of the Golden Valley High School all around the country.
Fantastic, and I love the story from Marshall Tannick about after it finished as Golden Valley High School, the little bit of a tug of war between Breck School and the Minnesota Vikings, of all things, for that property. And who would have thought that the school would outbid the Vikings? But I guess back in that day, that is certainly what happened. David, talk a little bit about the layout of the roads in Golden Valley. There was some comments about the curviness of the roads in Golden Valley, and being up in this area myself for about 35 years, as I venture through Golden Valley on occasion, I will go, this is a little different. You can't get straight from here to there in a lot of the residential areas. Tell me a little bit about why that was unique and how that really fit into the landscape of the city.
Well, I think, first of all, Golden Valley was a lot of swamp, and so roads had to go around the water areas where they didn't like just fill them in, which they probably did often.
Right.
But when we first, my wife and I first moved to Golden Valley, the people who had moved in there in the 50s, they very much wanted a country look. So they didn't want the straight streets like Linda Loomis had mentioned, like they had in Minneapolis. They wanted something that seemed more rural, less city-like, and so therefore the curvy streets. We didn't have curbs and gutters for a long time, and that's why.
Don, people think of Golden Valley and they probably don't think of agriculture and cows and some of the things that we heard about in the video. But take us back to some of the farming that happened in the city of Golden Valley. I understand there's some neat stories about some of the crops that came out of Golden Valley, and some of it was pretty well known. Is that right?
Yes, yes. There were lots of excuse me. There were lots of truck farmers who took their produce to Minneapolis and sold to the retailers in Minneapolis, and they also had a farmer's market. We also had a lot of pig farms.
Okay, pigs as well.
In
Very
Golden
good.
Valley. And there's one story about Glenwood Avenue. The pig farmers would take their empty wagon with their horse, and they go to the restaurants and stores in Minneapolis, pick up the garbage, and then they would go west on Golden Valley Road, and there was a hill on Golden Valley Road, and they had to stop at the top of the hill to rest the horse, and all of the liquids that was in the truck in the back of the rolled down onto the road, and the neighbors around there complained about the odor, and so they passed an ordinance. The council passed an ordinance saying you can't stop your horse at the top of the hill on Glenwood Avenue.
Very good story.
And
Also,
just to add to Don's
Yeah,
story,
go right ahead.
flowers were big too. There were some big flower
Sure.
farms
Yes.
in
Right.
Golden Valley.
Yes. And the streetcar came to the end at Theodore Worth Park by the lake, and people in Golden Valley had to walk or be picked up by someone. And the other transportation was the railroad. The loose line, people in Minneapolis would get on the loose line train, and they'd get off at the crossroad where the Golden Valley Country Club was to play golf. And then they would catch the train going back the other way to go back to Minneapolis, and it was down at 7th and 1st Avenue North, or where the
How
depot
about
was
that?
at that time.
isn't that something? Yeah,
Yes.
to think that you take the train to get to Golden Valley to go play golf. But
Yes.
that's how things happened back in the day. Speaking of golf, a nice little bit in there about Brookview and some of the history of Brookview. I'm sure many residents of Golden Valley, young and old, have enjoyed some of the things at Brookview. David and Don, either one of you, just a little thought about the history of Brookview and how that came to be for the city and really turned out to be quite the gem.
Well, I think it was the residents who had the opportunity of having not just a golf course but a swimming pool, and a country club owned by the city, and it was their vision of the community and the council at that time that allowed that to happen. And now it's a tremendous asset. And even lawn bowling is something new that's been introduced to the city of Golden Valley, and it's very popular activity and bringing people out to the community.
Yeah, something new, some new history being made. Another question that came in talks about the Historical Society, and again, both of you are members of the Golden Valley Historical Society. So David, how do people become a member, and what are the different ways people can get involved? Do I have to attend meetings every week, or can I stay in touch through this newsletter? What are the different ways, and how do you do that?
So you can become a member. We have on our website, you can download a application to become a member. It is $20 for an individual and $25 for a family. And you don't have to be a member to volunteer. There's lots of things that we need help with that we would love to have volunteers for. And then getting involved is just a wonderful way to get part of the community and to learn more about Golden Valley history.
Don, anything to add to that, of the value of being a member of the Historical Society?
Well, it gets you involved in learning the heritage of Golden Valley. All of the people who are members of the society, who are participating in committees and on the board, are all volunteers. We've never had a salaried person to lead us. It's always been volunteer.
That's fantastic. I commented as we were sitting back here in the studio watching the video, as you were as well, about the Aquafolics and Theodore Wirth and that whole area. Don, memories of that and the thought that there was that type of a huge activity right there next door for so many years.
Yes, that story is really amazing. They had the swimmers who were precision swimmers who performed, and there was music. When I lived in Bryn Mawr on Cedar Lake Road, and in the summertime we would have our windows open, and I could hear the music from the Aquafolics in my bedroom as I was trying to go to sleep.
Wow, yeah, quite an event in the area. David, we talked quite a bit in the video about parks, and as a resident of Golden Valley, how valuable are the parks, and how has that really become a valuable asset to the city?
I'm really big into bicycling, and so the parks and the trails, especially to me, are important. And Golden Valley has some great trails as well as the parks. My kid is growing up now, so I go to the parks less often, but I use the trails for biking all the time.
Yeah, great assets to the city. How about you, Don? Any memories about parks in the area or the development of parks and how that became very important? And again, I think as maybe Joni said in the video, that as people came to Golden Valley, they were very careful to make sure that their house was going to be near one of these valuable parks.
That's true, and her father, Ray Stockman, was the father of the park system. And he would talk to the developers to donate some of their land for park systems. However, the developer would look at the land that has the least amount of ability to be built on.
Right.
And so that's how he got and accumulated all the park system. And he would go out and talk to other developers who had fill to get rid of, and he would tell them to go dump it in this spot because we need to fill it in. So it was really kind of swampy land that he took over, but the parks turned out to be beautiful.
Yeah, and certainly a big asset to the city and very well used. Again, if you are following us on Facebook here during this, and if you have some reminiscing to do or some comments, certainly send those in. We will continue to watch our Facebook here as we continue on. Let's talk a little bit about the museum a little bit more, and as people again see the backgrounds here and some of the pictures of the Little White Church. Have you ever counted, gentlemen, how many items are in the museum? Do one of you know off the top of your head, if I go there, there's a lot of wonderful things. How many, Don, David?
Well, I don't know how many.
They're looking at each other.
we have what we consider 2D objects and 3D objects.
Okay.
Right. So there's lots of paper from all sorts of newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
We have I just realized we had a 1913 atlas, which I guess is a nice part of our collection. And then, of course, 3D objects, and there's a lot of the things that are in the museum. Plus, we have a display showing some Byerly's things. It's kind of sad that it's closed now during the virus, because I'm really encouraging people to come in and see it. And the e-wall display is also very impressive to see all the things that they had pens and buttons and things with the Ewald name on them, and they let us put up a display with that stuff in it.
Don, how about your thoughts? How many? I'm sure you probably touched at least 3/4 of the items in there, or if not more, right?
Don donated a lot of them.
Right.
Actually, Crystal Boyd, one of the projects that she took over was to have all of the archives inventoried and put in digital means, where when I was there, it was all handwritten pages. But now it's in digital form, and soon we will be able to have people dial in on their computer and get into our inventory to investigate things on their own. But that's a little bit of ways yet, but that's another part of the goal.
A favorite display or two of yours within the museum? Something that you go there and you're especially proud of, or you find that when people come tour the museum when it is open, that they really stop and spend some time at?
I would say that the alumni display we have in there of the Golden Valley High School is one stop that people stop and look very carefully and say, oh, I remember that person, I remember that person. Then the other thing we have is the Byerly's display, which is very unique, and we have the Ewald Brothers Dairy display, which again has lots of individual items available for people to look at. But one of the things that really makes people really go, wow, when they go down a few steps to the lower level and they see these huge racks of signs, vintage street signs there. Wow, they go and they say, we never realized that there were so many street signs in Golden Valley. And they usually pick out 2 or 3 that they want to buy, and then say, oh, well, I'm going to take that one because my brother-in-law I'm going to give that to my brother-in-law. And so right now I'm working with somebody from Florida who was a longtime resident of Golden Valley, and that person's going to buy 10 different signs to give to his relatives, and so that's part of the interesting part of this museum.
That's fantastic. Yes, these signs going all over the country and the world, probably. David, let's talk a little bit about, again, involvement in the Historical Society and ways, again, people can get involved. Is there a fee involved in being a member of the Historical Society, and is there anything on an ongoing basis that's a fee or a return that they get?
No, so we have the membership fee that I mentioned before. We have a monthly general membership meeting.
Okay.
And that's held all year except for the 3 months in the summer. And we generally have a program. Marshall Tannick has given lots of presentations, and as well as other people, either about specific things in Golden Valley or general history. People can come in. I'd encourage them to come into the museum. You don't have to be a member to come into the museum, and the museum is free. There's no charge for that. But what we do look for is the support, right? You don't even have to be a member to be, we would like more members, but to support the Historical Society, come see the museum. We have ways to donate either online or when you come to see the museum, there's an opportunity to
I was going to ask, you might just accept donations, and as you mentioned earlier, it takes a little bit of cash to keep up that building and to keep things going, so those are always accepted.
Our air conditioner is about to break down.
Okay, there might be specific needs on a regular basis as well. I want to ask you both about community involvement, and that was one thing that was highlighted in the video a couple times of how involved people became. You heard of the women very involved in politics and government at a time where that really wasn't the case, and then the Human Rights Commissions and some of the other groups. Don, first to you. Have you felt this in Golden Valley, and what do you think it is about Golden Valley that really drives people to be involved in the city, and all of these organizations that maybe have faded away a little bit in other communities seem to still be going in Golden Valley?
Well, I could give you a good example of one organization, the Golden Valley Rotary Club.
Sure.
They were interested in having something to do in Golden Valley to commemorate one of their anniversaries. When it might have been the 30th or the 35th anniversary. And so I suggested to them, how about partnering with the Golden Valley Historical Society and have a videographer do a video history of Golden Valley. And it only took $25,000, so they said, "All right, we'll do that." So we had a huge production, and we sold DVDs and CDs as a fundraiser. But it was also part of one of the individuals of our past president was Bob Provost, who was the moderator in this particular function, and that was something that made the Rotary Club proud that they could do something for Golden Valley, and it was also great for the Golden Valley Historical Society.
Yeah, very much so. David, from your end, that community involvement, is that something you've seen in the years you've been in Golden Valley? And obviously you must feel that urge to be involved yourself, being involved as you are with this group.
Yeah, I'm on the Police Crime Prevention Fund, and I found that as one way to get to understand the police department, all the challenges that they have in the community. They support a lot of activities to get the police out to meet the neighborhoods and things of that sort. You know, I think it takes strong people to lead these organizations and keep them going. Because as soon as you have a lack of leadership, that's when they start to fall apart. And you know, they mentioned Don very strongly with the Historical Society, and I can see that, you know.
Yep, leadership does make a difference, keep the different groups going. As we get ready to close the program, I want to mention a little bit about, again, other history videos that are part of the Our Town Story series on CCX Media. So if you go to ccxmedia.org and click on the Cities tab, you'll see a breakdown of Our Town Story. Click there and you can go to all of the other history videos from this area. You'll see Brooklyn Park included in there, the city of Robbinsdale, Plymouth history video, and also Maple Grove have been completed at this point. And again, as we were talking while the video was showing, some of the history from those other cities is very interesting to people here because, again, you might have people that go and, say, shop up in the city of Maple Grove, and they go up to Arbor Lakes and they see these big mounds of whatever that is. Why are there mountains in the city of Maple Grove? Well, of course, the gravel mines are there that were key to making Highway 100 and a lot of the transportation routes in this area. So if you want to go to ccxmedia.org and again click on Cities and Our Town Story, you can take a look at the 4 that have been completed now, and now the 5th will be added here in the next day or two. We wanted to debut it here, but now that will be added to that collection, so you can take a look at that. And you have seen a few times Golden Valley Historical Society.org, so that is the website. Tell us about some of the other things. David, we'll start with you on the website. So if I do go to Golden Valley Historical Society.org, what do I find there? What's some of the wealth of information that is right there at my computer?
Yeah. Well, we keep up on all the events that are coming up, and those events that we've had in the past, and those are often the programs that are at the monthly meetings. We keep copies of the newsletters. There are a whole archive of those out there. And then we talk about the weddings that can be hosted and how to get involved with that, volunteers, how to become a member. It tells some of the history about the Historical Society and the church being the oldest building. So there's a lot of information on there. And then just to build on, Don had mentioned that at some point our collection is going to be online. It's an effort by the Minnesota Alliance of Local History Centers that they started this MN Collections. And so there's already several counties and cities in the state that are on this, and we'll be on there. We're working toward having our collection on there.
Fantastic.
So that will be available to people soon.
Yeah, great treasure. And Don, I know you're a whiz at Facebook, so Golden Valley Historical Society always also has an active Facebook page as well, right? So a great way to stay in touch there.
It would be. I don't personally
I had to
subscribe
pull your
that.
leg on that.
Yes, but maybe in the next 10 years or so, I'll become more knowledgeable on this electronic stuff.
There you go. So Facebook is available, and again, great partner with us as we put this information together. And also they partnered with the city to be able to present some of this information to you tonight as well, and to promote the event as it was coming up. So again, a big thank you to the two of you for being a part of this night tonight, and also for being a part of the video. It goes back a year and a half that we've been working together on this, so really appreciate your involvement. And again, for all those that were involved in the video, you saw many familiar faces to the city of Golden Valley. And a special thank you to the crew that's here tonight helping us out with this debut program, and also Matt Kilby, as you saw, David Dobrin, Mike Johnson, some people that were named in the credits of that particular video. So final word, Don, as far as history in Golden Valley. Again, why should we pay attention? Why should people in Golden Valley and the surrounding areas really pay attention to local history?
Well, I think it goes back to what was our original group that founded Golden Valley. Where did they come from? When did they get started? Most of them were farmers. Where did they locate? By the way, where Channel 11 is now located, that used to be the Anderson farm, and you had a picture of the Anderson farm. That's where Channel 11 is now located.
Okay.
So people ask questions about what was there before, whatever it is now that's there, and it's interesting for people to understand and learn about the community. And also it's important for them to get involved, not just with the Historical Society, but with the many other organizations that are available. There's many ways people can participate in the future of Golden Valley.
Yes, definitely can. David, any final thoughts about the importance of history, and again, what keeps you plugging away at this society?
Well, I'm a big believer that what happened in history repeats itself, and to know what's happened, and I think Mayor Harris brought that up too, is to understand the history helps us in our future and our planning.
And if you would like to get involved again and be on the list for this newsletter on a regular basis, GoldenValleyHistoricalSociety.org, the place to find out more information. Join those 160 people that really want to stay in touch. And again, as we mentioned, this was just scratching the surface. So with these videos, the hope is capture some of the things, some of those names and places that Don mentioned that people ask about and think about, and get that information rolling to hopefully whet some appetites for people to look a little bit more into history of their own city that they live in. Next project for us related to city history in this northwest area is the city of Crystal. So we just did an interview in the past week out at the Phil's at the Crystal Community Center, reminiscing about the Bearcat Speedway and the original Crystal Airport location, which now is different than the location now. So again, look for that coming within the next year or so as we continue the History March. So Don, David, thank you so much for your time tonight and your time throughout the past year and a half. We really appreciate it.
And thank you for all of your efforts.
Oh, you're certainly welcome. And that is going to wrap us up tonight from the debut of Our Town Story Golden Valley. Thanks so much for joining us here on CCX Media, and if you can, do get involved in your local historical society. Thanks for joining us.